4, 3, 2, 1. I would welcome everybody to this special Grande Prairie City Council meeting for July 8th, 2020. We're here to receive a report from administration and the ICF negotiating committee with respect to ICF mediation protocols. Maybe just look to our city manager, Mr. Horacio Galante, to introduce this briefly.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good afternoon, everyone. The previous NDP government introduced the intermunicipal collaboration framework a few years ago, and we have been working in partnership with our neighbors, initially doing an inventory of services, not only for the city, but also in collaboration with region partners in the region. And after a year, we completed an initial report. Stanley Consulting was involved as part of that initial project. And then we started the more formal intermunicipal collaboration framework negotiations with the county, because we're touching boundaries with that jurisdiction about a year ago in May 2019. So we made good progress in some of the services, and the overall goal is to achieve more efficient, more effective service delivery for the region on both jurisdictions, the county and the city. So we went through the process, and because of COVID-19 situation, the provincial government decided to perform an extension for the formalization of the ICF. So now the new deadline is March 2021. So we decided a few months ago to start mediated conversations with the county. So there are 2 mediators involved as part of the process now. And as part of this formality, we came up with a mediation protocol. So to establish some rules and some specifics about how to conduct this process over the next few months. So this is what is in front of you today for ratification. County Council will do the same, I believe, next week and the next council meeting. And we took advantage of this opportunity today to do the ratification of this mediation protocols. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Great. Thank you, Ms. CAO Galante. So the ICF negotiating committee has seen these. I think myself, Councillor Clayton, and Councillor Friesen would be happy to speak to this. And I'd just make the observation that our last session, Councillors Bressie and O'Toole attended for just about all the session. Councillor Thiessen also did, and others. So happy to answer any questions. But essentially, I think the recommendation here is that we have a motion of council to approve the mediation protocols as presented. Is there any discussion or motions arising? Councillor Bressie.
Great, thank you. Question for yourself or our city manager that's more for the benefit of people that might be watching this than myself, but this gives a deadline of March 31st to have a mutually agreed agreement. What happens if we can't come to that mutually negotiated agreement after March 31st?
Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the process established under the MGA is pretty much based on 3 steps. The first step is facilitated conversations. We went through that process. Second step is to do mediated conversations, which we're currently in the beginning of this process. And if there is no formal ICF agreement reached at the end of the mediated conversations with the deadline of March 31st, 2021, the next step is to move the items that have not been agreed upon into a formal arbitration process. So some items could have been agreed, and we are working on specific MOUs already as part of this process. But if there are some items that we cannot reach agreement, those items potentially would be moved to the next step, that is formal arbitration. Thank you.
Okay. The only thing I would add to that is that it does not necessarily need to be a sequential process. If there are items that the parties agree might benefit from an alternate resolution process like arbitration, we have the ability to do that while continuing through mediation. So it doesn't, although the document lays out that goal of having the entire thing complete in a mediated fashion by March 31st, if there are items that are essentially sticking points, the document does allow us to refer those to arbitration if the parties agree that it might be useful. And the legislation allows any party to choose to refer something to arbitration without impacting the rest of the mediation that could continue. So that's sort of the maximum deadline. But if we choose to use arbitration anywhere through the process, that is an option available to the parties. Are there any other questions or, ultimately that motion that we're looking to have? Councillor Friesen?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Gibbons. So I will actually go ahead and make the motion that council approve the mediation protocols for the intermunicipal collaboration framework.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Friesen. Any discussion? I saw you, Councillor O'Toole, with your hand up as well. You'll just have to get your mic, Councillor O'Toole, and then after Councillor O'Toole, we'll go to Councillor Bressie. Councillor O'Toole?
I was just going to make the motion that Ms. Friesen made, so we're good.
Thanks, Councillor O'Toole. Councillor Bressie?
Great. Thank you, Mayor Gibbon. While I, of course, have an open mind, especially on something this important, I'm probably going to be voting no to this. And the sticking point for me is the March 31st deadline is too late for me. I'd like us to insist on getting through this mediation process quicker than that. And I think the reason is that I'm very impressed by the work that yourself, Councillor Clayton, Councillor Friesen, and our admin team has done. I think we've done a great job of making our cases. I think that we've approached this in good faith, and I hope that it's been approached in good faith by the county as well. That being said, I think that we're very far apart, and it's not just that we're far apart in terms of our positions on things. I think there's just some important aspects where we've got a fundamentally different approach to the county, and I really think that there's a strong likelihood that we end up taking some of our most significant matters to arbitration. And if that happens, it's a priority for me that arbitration happens before this council term is over. We've spent most, if not all of our term of this being one of our top priority items. We spent countless hours and huge sums of money doing this. And my worry is that if we don't complete both mediation and arbitration before the next municipal elections, we set up the next council to spend a year figuring out what they're going to do, then initiating another process that takes a year or two. And I think it's a lot of work and a lot of taxpayer money that risks getting thrown out if we take too long to do this. So for me, I'm not interested in a March 31st deadline for mediation. I can't support it if we're not hoping to be done by December 31st. So we have some time to hopefully get through the next phase before this council term ends. So I'm probably voting no to this, and I'd encourage my colleagues to do the same.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Bressie. Any other discussion or debate? Councillor Clayton?
Thanks, Mayor Gibbon. I absolutely support Councillor Bressie's comments and sentiments. I believe that, as I think my council colleagues on this committee do, that this goal of December 31st was very obtainable. However, unfortunately, the counterparts in the arrangement don't believe so, and therefore I will support the motion simply because this needs to continue to go ahead. If I believe that there was any chance that that both parties of the arrangement were going to work diligently and proactively to get this agreement done by December 31st, I might vote differently. However, I believe that the county believes they may need more time to get through some of this, and in good faith, I will allow them that more time with the support of this motion, and just optimistically believe that the team between Councillor Friesen and Mayor Gibbon and I will, and with CAO Galante, will work hard to finish this with the best use of time in mind. I truly believe that both partners in this relationship are there being paid from ratepayers, and to use any unnecessary time or extra time isn't fair, because we were paid to do numerous things, not just negotiate an ICF. So I support your sentiment, Councillor Bressie, but I will support the motion because I believe that through due diligence and hard work, we will push hard to get this done sooner than later. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Clayton. Councillor Minhas?
Thank you. Well, Mayor Given, it's my clarification is, my understanding was we can say no anytime with the mediation when we are not satisfied to go to arbitration. Can we go earlier than that, or till March 31st? We still have to carry on with the mediation.
No, Councillor Minhas, the agreement, the protocols actually allow for for the mediators to identify if an alternate resolution process might be, better. So if there's something that is a sticking point that is not likely to be solved by mediation, these protocols do allow for that to be raised by the mediators. And ultimately, in the legislation, any party to the ICF can ask to have an item go to arbitration. And so, no, we don't have to wait for that step until after mediation or after March 31st. It could happen at any time through the process. If the will of council is there, we absolutely can do that. So, no, it isn't something we have to wait till March 31st for.
Thank you for answering.
Any other discussion or debate on the motion? I don't see any. I would just encourage council members to support this. I think most or all of us probably agree with Councillor Bressy's assessment of the situation. My encouragement to council would be to support these protocols because they were agreed upon by the negotiating committees, your negotiating committee. I think it's fair to have, if there's a need to make a demonstration that this is not moving fast enough for our council, I think that that's fine if there was a vote in opposition. But ultimately, this doesn't need to carry forward because if these fail, then we don't have any protocols in place and wouldn't be able to move forward with the mediation stage, which would actually have an effect of slowing things down rather than speeding them up. I know that Councillors Clayton, Friesen, the city manager, myself are committed to moving this forward as quickly as possible. And the first step in that is having these passed so we can move on to the next meetings, which have already been scheduled with the county. I don't know if Councillor Friesen wanted to close or if there's anything else. Councillor Friesen?
Thank you, Mayor Given. I certainly would just echo what you've exactly what you just said. We did put forward that we would like to move a little more quickly, and the other side, the county, felt that that wasn't reasonable. And if we can't come to an agreement on this at this point, we're stymied already. And here we'd like to spend some time negotiating in good faith and having the mediators that we've hired really, bring their expertise to helping our two sides come together. But without this in place, we can't even do that. And I hope that my colleagues on council will support the protocols that Councillor Clayton and Mayor Given and I have brought forward to you today. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Friesen. So with that close, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor? Thank you. And any opposed? I see one opposed. Thanks very much, Council. So that concludes all of the work for this special council meeting. We will adjourn the meeting and move into our council committee of the whole meeting in just a minute or two, and maybe we'll do a new countdown for administration. So we'll pause.
I just add in.
Yeah, no problem. So we'll do 2 minutes to allow people just to get reset to make sure our administration folks are there. And then when we go to start the CCW meeting, I'll do a little count in again. So just a minute or two while everybody switches agendas. And while we're doing that, Stephanie, I see your name beside the report. And so will you introduce the report? Just kind of give us a lay of the land where we left off last time and what's left to deal with?
For sure.
Okay, thank you. So just let everybody get set again.
I don't know, she was meowing away while we were sitting here, and now she's not. So if again I have to get up, it's just to go to the door to let her in. It'll be very quick. Don't count me as away from the meeting, but I'm back for now.
Okay, Okay, thanks. I see Chris, I see Jackie. Okay, so that looks like everybody that's going to be here. So again, I'm not sure if somebody hit stop and then we'll hit record again, but we'll do a new countdown for the start of the Council Committee of the Whole. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We are back with the Grande Prairie City Council Committee of the Whole meeting to discuss community group funding. This is the second half of a meeting that we had about a week ago. And I'll look to Ms. Cajolet to give us a bit of an update about where we ended off last time and what work we have left to do on this topic. Stephanie.
Perfect. Thank you, Mayor Gibbon. Following our last Council Committee of the Whole, there were a number of recommendations that motions were made for and later approved by Council. So there are 4 recommendations that are currently outstanding that we'll begin with today. So the first one relates to the recommendation to change the criteria for the Arctic Winter Games Legacy Fund. So in follow-up to the conversation from the previous meeting, administration has reached out to the AWG board members. Unfortunately, at this time, we have not received information back from a sufficient number of members yet. So we will bring that back to the appropriate standing committee and for future decision. So that does impact one potential community group. So I would guess if it's fine that we bring that back at a later time, later this summer, we could certainly confirm with the community group at that time their approved or recommended allocation. And if not, I guess an option could be, as part of the discussion today, to include that group as part of the enhancement category for community group funding and adjust the allocations to account for this amount. The larger items, recommendations to be reviewed would be reviewing the operating grant allocations as have been presented in attachment A, the capital funding grants as presented in attachment B, and then the fourth one would be, given that we have not received sufficient information from to deal with item number 4, we would either just refer that to the appropriate standing committee and bring it back to council, or include that as part of the allocations for operating grant allocations in attachment A.
Okay. Hey, thanks very much, Stephanie. So I think that what I'm hearing there is a recommendation that items 1 and 4 on this agenda could be, if council wished to provide more time for the former members of the Arctic Winter Games Host Society to provide an opinion, then an approach might be to recommend, to forward items, a motion to forward items 1 and 4 to an appropriate standing committee, maybe in August or some other time that would allow some time to pass. And then we would have to deal with items 2 and 3 today. How does that sound, everybody? Is there anybody who would be interested in making a motion with respect to items 1 and 4? Councillor Clayton.
Thanks, Mayor Gibbon. I would move that item 1 and 4 on the current recommendations be moved to be discussed at a later date at the next appropriate standing committee. I guess it'd have to be Council Committee of the Whole, so at the next, the next suitable date.
Yeah, maybe we just say to an appropriate standing committee in August, recognizing we do have a council break coming up, and a motion framed that way would be clear that we're not expecting a new Council Committee of the Whole for that. Obviously, all of council would get a chance to review any recommendations coming from the committee.
Sounds good.
Okay, any discussion or debate on that motion? Seeing none, then oh, sorry, Councillor Bressie, did you have something?
Yeah, thank you. Just I don't think that this needs to, it definitely doesn't need to be an amendment to this motion, and I don't even know if it needs to be a motion of its own, but just something I want to highlight to administration and I hope gets followed up on is the Wolverines Adaptive Sports Association, when they were making their presentation, it sounded like more of the concern was over being viable this year and the fallouts of COVID-19. And I know there was some discussion yesterday at the Community Service Committee about other groups that are applying for emergency funding. And I realize I don't recall hearing Wolverine Sports Association in part of that conversation, so just highlighting that might be an appropriate funding stream for them as well. And I hope that as we talk about emergency group funding, that's something that's in administration's mind, if that might be a good place to redirect them to as well. So I don't think it needs a motion, but I wanted to highlight it.
Okay, thanks, Councilor Ressi. Any other discussion or debate on the motion? Seeing none, then I'll call for the vote. All those in favor? Thank you. That motion carries unanimously. Okay, so next up to the will of council, we have two other items on our agenda for today. Item number 2 is the long list of community group funding operating grant allocations. And item number 3 is the 2021 capital funding allocations. And I'm open for motions from any council member. Councillor Blackburn.
Thank you, Mayor Given. I do have a motion regarding this, and I will read the motion, and then I would like to speak to it. I have two motions actually. So the first one is move that the Grande Prairie Public Library be removed from the community group funding and instead be funded through the city's operating budget at the amount required by the library board's budget. And to speak to this, first of all, I've long said, and you've heard me before say that the library should not be included as part of community groups. It is a city entity. I had a look at what comparisons there might be between the library and the airport commission, both of which are city entities by one description or another. Both of them are run by organizations other than our administration. However, we do have involvement with both of those organizations, and we also appoint members to both the commission and to the library board. The only difference that is major in this comparison is that the airport has a revenue stream and has the ability to fund itself for the most part in terms of operating. The library, of course, does not have that same ability, which is why they come to us for funding. However, I do believe that because they are a city entity and because the library is something that we would want to exist in almost any circumstance, it should be something that we deal with as an operating budget item. I mentioned in my motion that we be giving them the money that they require according to their budget rather than an arbitrary number that we might choose depending on what goes up or down in terms of community funding. But I would also suggest that if this motion should pass, that the library budget would be something that would be done in conjunction with the city, so that if there was a need for the city to say, hey, library, everybody's in a tight pinch right now, and maybe there's some things you should look at not doing, that would be, to me, a far better approach than simply saying, okay, we're dropping community funding by a certain amount of money, and library, you're stuck with it. So that's my motion, and I hope that my colleagues will support it.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Blackburn. That motion's open for discussion debate. Councillor Clayton.
Thanks, Mayor. Given a question for administration, Ms. Cajolet, or maybe Councillor Blackburn knows as the representative of that organization, what are the quantities of the surpluses right now that the public library hold within their accounts and their reserves, I guess, not surpluses, rather?
Councillor Blackburn.
Thank you. I have 2017 numbers because these are the numbers that I pulled from the 2019 audited financial statement. And they have a number of reserves. Capital reserves is about $268,000. Their facility upgrade and future sites reserve is just under 200,000. Their technology and innovation reserve is 203,000. And their furnishing and equipment reserves, 318,000. Collection development reserve is at $91,000. And then there are the three designated reserves that came from by way of donations. The Collins Legacy Fund is at $50,000. The Hogue Legacy Fund is at $26,000. And the Jansen Legacy Fund is at $814,000. And I would just like to point out that each of these were gifts with specific instructions as to how those funds were to be spent.
Great, and if I may, Mayor Gibbon. So regardless of the bequests or the gifts that, as you mentioned, have obvious criteria to them, we're just on approximately $1 million in reserves for different sort of buckets of needs that they've assessed. Can administration or yourself, Councillor Blackburn, tell me how many years, is it every year that the libraries used to put money into reserves? Does it happen frequently, infrequently? What are the potential that, are they adding a little bit each year, or just some years they have some really big windfalls? Do you know what financially that looks like?
No, I'm afraid I don't. I don't know if Councillor Friesen, who is currently on the board, might know that.
Sure, Councillor.
Sorry, yeah, thank you, Mayor Gibbon. I'm just looking for the most recent financial statements is kind of what I'm focused on right now.
Well, and so maybe we'll give you a chance to do that. I know that Ms. Cajolet probably, as a part of the group's application, had the most recent financial statements. Ms. Cajolet?
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Gibbon. So based on the information provided as part of their application, at the end of 2019, the library was sitting with approximately $1.9 million in reserves. In 2018 and 2019, they withdrew from reserves, did not contribute to, and that withdrawal collectively for those 2 years amounted to about $180,000.
Okay, so I think that actually kind of answers both questions. Over the last number of years, they have been drawing down, and we also got an updated total. We didn't get Councillor Blackburn was able to give us a better breakdown of what that total, how it was comprised, but an updated total and the fact that they have been drawing down over the last couple of years.
Thank you.
Any other discussion or debate? I see Director Bork.
Thank you, Mayor Gibbon. Just from a budgeting perspective, some advice on how this would impact on the budget process. As the motion's worded, it would treat them more like a department, which would require our variance reporting and a whole bunch of other onerous things that we would advise against for such an organization. That we also, the motion as worded turns over the setting of the budget to the library. If we were to follow a precise view of what that wording is, I appreciate that Councillor Blackburn's asked us to work with them, but as it's worded, it sounds like the library would get to set their budget. What we would advise would be if there was a willingness or a desire to separate this out, is that this be a separate grant line item, separate from community grant funding, where the level was set, but separate and independent from community group funding. That would be the less administratively onerous way to do this, and still to offer some transparency and flexibility for the library to operate independently.
Okay, thanks for that advice, Director Bork. So, Councillor Blackburn, you heard that. I wonder how comfortable you are with sort of revising your motion, or if you want to stick with the way that it was worded.
No, I would be very comfortable to strike the last half and just move that the Grande Prairie Public Library be removed from the community group funding and funded separately.
And maybe, Councillor Blackburn, I think your intention is, and let's just clarify this, is your intention that they're funded to the level of their 2021 request?
Yes.
So maybe if that's your intention, maybe we should have that as a part of the motion. So you're saying there's sort of two active parts there. One, let's take it out of this list and have it stand separately. It's no longer in community group funding. It's a grant to the library board, and that grant shall be the amount that they requested in 2021. Is that what you're intending?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
That
okay. So
suits my purpose.
Okay. So we'll make sure that we're all on the same page there about that motion. I'll just look to make sure that administration is able to capture that clarification of the motion. I see Arlene nodding that she was able to. I do see you, Councillors Bressie and Clayton. Councillor Bressie and then Councillor Clayton. Thank
you. I just wonder if it might be worth splitting that motion, although I support both clauses of those. For me, it's more important that we've got a good process of the library going forward, and I definitely agree with Councillor Blackburn that it should be removed from our usual community group funding process. I don't know if that's the same conversation, though, as how much to set it for this year. And I'd hate to see if that amount isn't palatable to council, even though it's palatable to me. I'd hate to see us not put it in its own process just because we don't agree on that amount. So I wonder if it might be worth first making the motion about process and then setting the amount.
Sure. So as chair, I'll take that. We always are pretty open to motion requests to split motions there when there are sort of two active parts. So we'll grant that request, and let's have the discussion debate on the first part, the removing the library from this community group funding process and into an alternate process that is strictly for the library. Discussion and debate on that part of the motion. I don't see anybody raising their hand, and if that's the case, then I will call for the vote on the first part of Councillor Blackburn's motion to remove the library.
Oh, sorry.
Funding. Yeah, Councillor Clayton.
Sorry, I thought you were voting, I was thinking as an amendment. My apologies. So I'd like to discuss the first part of the motion, if that's all right.
Yeah,
thank
please.
you. So maybe Mayor Given or somebody from administration knows, I have a couple of questions here. Tell me the reason that it wasn't in operational, such as the airport in the past. Was it ever in community group and then went operational, came back, or has it always just been part of community group funding?
I don't know if Ms. Cajolet wants to speak that from an administration perspective, and then I'll maybe give a historical perspective.
Oh, I certainly don't know the historical information to be able to reply to that question, so please, Mayor Given, thank you.
Yeah, so Councillor Clayton, I think my observation would be that the city's funding to entities that are not explicitly City of Grande Prairie has changed over time. And I think it has, this is probably one of those things that's a bit of a pendulum. I think just about every group was funded independently on its own line item as a grant. There were some groups where their budget, their grants, things that were essentially grants, were in a departmental budget. Over the years, council has asked to have that information more and more centralized to where we've arrived at this point today where basically all groups are being directed into one bucket. Yeah, and so I would say that absolutely there were times in the past where the funding amount for the library board would have shown up in a departmental budget. It was still a grant, to be really clear. It was never city, it was never city operations. It was a grant out to the organization, but it was not collected in the same way here.
Great. And if I can have a question for Director Bork. Can you tell me how financially this will change the scrutiny of the organization in regards to the funding that they will get in the grant? We go through operational funding each year, but will administration be reviewing as in-depth as they are right now that they do with community group funding if this organization were to be moved to operational funding?
Director Bork?
I don't know if we've thought about that. This would be reviewed annually during budget time, so it would be whatever scrutiny council wanted to put on it at that time. It would be though separate from the regular funding changes, but it would be reviewed every year during approval of budget.
It looked like Ms. Cajolet might have had a supplement.
Certainly, based on the amount of funding that they receive, they would be one of the groups that would report back to the appropriate standing committee on an annual basis.
Okay, thank you. I just want to, in speaking to Councillor Blackburn's motion, I appreciate your intent with making this, it's a pillar of our community, as are many other organizations that the city works with, such as the Curling Club, the Art Gallery, the Golden Age Center, other facilities. My concern is that we're setting a precedent by putting the Grande Prairie Library into operation, that it's not looped in with the other organizations that we grant money to. And so I think that they all should be in the similar sort of format and process. And considering that they do have some reserves, they haven't come to us for a lot of support in the year. I think that they're doing a great job there. However, to me, all the organizations should be in one format, and therefore I would like to see them stay at community group funding. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Clayton. Any other discussion or debate on the point? Councillor Bressie?
Thank you. Yeah, and I will be supporting this motion. I hope Council will too, because I do think that the library is substantially different than any other organization we support. The Montrose Cultural Center is one of our 2 flagship facilities we have in the city, and the library is the most visible of the 2 organizations in there. It's the one we give the most money to. It's an organization that's actually got that's got its own provincial legislation, and it's got a board that we directly appoint a member to for all kinds of reasons. I think it is different than most other community groups. And I'd even point out that even in your municipal tax dollars at work, we separate the way that we communicate our budget to our family. There's a little pie chart for the library in there. And I think that makes a lot of sense to residents, because I think that they do see library funding as separate from the funding we give to any other nonprofits. And I think for me, even as we communicate how much gets given to community groups, quite often I hear from the community, I can't believe you give that much to community groups. And then I go, yeah, but you realize that over $1.5 million of that is library funding? And all of a sudden, the number makes a lot more sense to them, because the residents that I talk to don't tend to see the library as the same as other organizations. So I think both for some administrative and governance reasons, it makes sense to treat them differently. And also for the sake of transparency, well, it makes sense to the public. I think it makes sense to treat them separately. So I hope this motion passes.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Bressie. I did see these others. Councillor Blackburn, I'll come to you to close. I think I saw Councillor Thiessen next, and then Councillor O'Toole.
Thanks, Mayor Given. Actually, I just pulled up the Libraries Act, and I was going to talk about legislation and the role that the library did, and I think Councillor Bressie did a fine job of that. So just saying that, I'm going to support Councillor Blackburn's motion.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Thiessen. Councillor O'Toole?
Yeah, I won't be supporting it. I think Councillor Clayton did a great job of explaining why, and I do feel that the library is fairly wealthy at this point in time, and I would rather go through a city community group, and so I won't be supporting this. Sorry.
Okay, thanks, Councillor O'Toole. Before I go to Councillor Blackburn to close, I'll say that I will support the motion. And when we look at the list of organizations here, there is two things that are unique to the Grande Prairie Public Library here. First, they are the only organization on the list whose audited financial statements are actually incorporated into the City of Grande Prairie's audited financial statements. That's how they are similar to the airport, but different from every other group on this list. And I think that is because of the level of control that the City of Grande Prairie ultimately has on the organization. Aside from the members that are there from surrounding funding municipalities, the MD of Greenview, and I think the County of Grande Prairie, every other member of that board is appointed by City Council. So we are effectively in control of the library board in a way that is not the same for any of the other organizations. So I think it does really have some factors that make it different and distinct from any of the other groups here. And for those reasons, I support Councillor Blackburn's motion to remove it from community group funding and have it move through a different process. I didn't see anybody else, so I'll go to Councillor Blackburn to close.
Thank you, Mayor Given. I appreciate the comments on both sides. My observation, and I may be wrong about this, but my observation is that when our term started, administration was asked how much money it is that we as a city give to groups outside of the city, outside of our operation. And I believe that it was at that time that the list was made that we're now looking upon as the list of community groups. So when funding was coming out of various parts of the budget, then each was given their own consideration. When we were first brought this list of community groups, which included the library, it was at a time where we were looking at maybe making across-the-board cuts to all of the organizations in that group. And it occurred to me at that time that there were a couple of groups that shouldn't be included in across-the-board cuts because we couldn't paint them all with the same brush. And the library was one of those, where they have their own operating budget and a very different relationship to the city than most of the other groups on the list. I talked about Tourism Association at the same time because it was really meant for our funding to them to be on a per capita basis. And we decided that we wouldn't go with that kind of a formula because it wouldn't fit in with making across the board cuts. So I really do think that our previous process of dealing with the library through another department's budget is far more appropriate. And so I hope that Council will support this motion. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Blackburn. So we're dealing with the first part of Councillor Blackburn's motion, which in effect removes the Grande Prairie Public Library Board from the community group funding process to an alternate process. And then we'll deal with the second part of the motion about how much would be funded for 2021 after we vote on this part of it. So that was the close on the first portion. I'll call for the vote. All those in favor? Okay, I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of us, and opposed. And I see 1, 2, 3 opposed. So that motion does carry. So we'll move now to the second part of the motion, which we clarified that the intent was to fund the Grande Prairie Public Library Board's 2021 operating request to the full amount. And so open for discussion and debate on that point. Councillor Clayton.
Thanks, Mayor Given. A question for Ms. Cajolet. So the two numbers there equate to 1.617 approximately, 1.618. And I see the grant allocations were slightly more for 2020. Was 2020 an increase from 2019? Can you remind me?
Ms. Cajolet.
Thank you, Mayor Given. Yes, it was, Councillor Clayton.
And what were the numbers in 2019?
It was about a $30,000 increase.
Thank you.
Councillor Thiessen.
Yeah, thank you very much. I had some time to think about it. Thank you to Councillor Blackburn for giving me the heads up, but I haven't been able to change my mind on this one. I can't support the motion. As much as I would like to support the motion, I think once we move it into an alternative process, which is happening now, I think then we can start to really evaluate the numbers and the asks. As much as I want to give money to a variety of organizations, including city departments, across the board, we've been cutting our own city departments to deal with what we're dealing with now with COVID and the directions of council of the previous budget as well. With that level of scrutiny, I don't know if the Grande Prairie Public Library would have came back with another increased ask, or if they would have just tried to hold the line or find reductions and some savings in the work that they do. So for all those reasons, I'm going to take a look at this recommended funding as what we should do as the city and what is in our best interest. And then we can reevaluate when we move forward in the future. So, thanks.
Okay. So thanks for that, Councillor Thiessen. I see in the chat function, Councillor Clayton, you had a question. It looks like your question was, what is the specific amount in Councillor Blackburn's motion? And so just to clarify, Councillor Blackburn, was your intent to fund their full 2021 operating request, which in our document appears to be 1.6 $699,500,000.
Yes, that was my intent. And I would think that if we were going to ask the library to fund us for less, we would at least hold them to last year's funding amount rather than cutting it by a whole lot more.
Okay. So Councillor Clayton, and so appreciate we have lots of different ways to discuss with each other using technology. I'm not sure that the chat function shows up for anybody in the recording of the council meeting, and so if we do have questions, let's please try to raise them and verbalize them. If anything comes through the chat, I'll make sure to verbalize it, but council members can do that as well, so we can get the attribution right. Councillor Bressie?
Great, thank you. I can't support this motion, but also I don't like the recommendation before us in terms of if we had been talking about this back in February, I probably would have been supporting this motion to give them the requested increase. But I know that coming through COVID, we've got a lot of nonprofits that suffered big revenue shortfalls. I don't think that's the case with the library, that they had the revenue shortfall that other places did, because they're mostly municipal grants. And for that reason, if we're going to look at increased funding to some organizations this year, I'd rather that be targeted towards organizations that have had more troubles financially coming through COVID. So I can't support this increase this year. At the same time, if this motion does fail, I probably would support a motion to keep their allocation the same, because I also don't think we should be cutting their funding. I just don't think it's the year to increase them with the other needs in the community right now.
Thanks, Councillor Bressie. I had Councillor Clayton, Councillor Minhas, then Councillor Friesen.
Thanks, Mayor Gibbon. I also can't support the motion, and I echo some of Councillor Bressie's thoughts in regards to I would like to see it potentially even significantly less than the recommendation. But for the fact that this organization, albeit a pillar of our community, hasn't been as heavily impacted by COVID as some of the other ones, that we are going to have to fund less this year and in 2021 as well. And so I just think that based on their financial stability of this organization, that I can't support an increase, and potentially would look to support a decrease of the recommendation. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Clayton. I think I had Councillor Minhas, then Councillor Friesen.
Thank you very much. I won't support it either. I will be okay with the recommended one, but I got a question, other one too. Grande Prairie Library Board lease, what that's part of the library, or this is something different lease? We paying $12,000.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Minhas. So just to be clear, that isn't a part of the motion, but Ms. Cajolet, maybe you can clarify that line item for us.
Certainly, that would be a lease agreement for insurance costs.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Sorry, Councillor Friesen, then Councillor O'Toole.
Thank you. I just wanted to respond to the I'm sorry, the words out of my head. The statement that the library has not had the same reduction in revenue that other organizations have. And I just checked, and I'm afraid that the most recent statements I have are actually from pre-COVID. But I do know that a lot of the library's income is also from fine revenue, which has all been waived through this, as well as the community group bookings in their various rooms, other user groups, groups that do pay for not only a room, but also to attend the programs at the library, different things like that. So there are a number of revenue streams that the library has also lost. And I'm not saying that to, hold them up as in greater need than any other organization in the city, but I felt that that was an important part of this conversation to clarify.
Okay. Thanks, Councillor Friesen. Councillor O'Toole.
Thank you very much, Mayor Gibbon. I will not be supporting this motion. In fact, I would like it to be reduced to the recommendation of 2021 of 1.6055. So if it does fail, and if I don't get in first, I would be making that motion. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Councillor O'Toole. I'll say that I won't support the motion as it is now. I would support continuing the 2020 grant allocation amount because I think that that's reasonable. Appreciating that, like many other organizations, the library would have faced some stress over the course of this year. So continuing the 2020 amount into 2021 seems reasonable to me. I wouldn't be looking to go down from that amount, but I'm also not looking to go up at this time. So I won't be supporting this motion, but would be happy to support something that continued their funding at the 2020 amount if that came. We'll go to, if there isn't anybody else, yeah, Councillor Friesen, before I go to Councillor Blackburn to close.
Thank you. I probably should have spoken to this while I had the mic a moment ago, but I won't support this motion either, and for very many of the same reasons that you just mentioned, Mayor Given, as well as, you know, if we were simply cutting community group funding and now we're moving the library into operations, if we weren't also cutting operations, that you know, that would be a different look. But the fact is, we are, as a council, across the board, asking our organization internally as well as those that we support externally to really take a close look at the money that they are in need of and what they are spending, and to really, for lack of a better term, tighten our belts. We're all doing this together, and to separate the library out of that expectation, I think in principle is unfair. I don't support the motion to give the requested amount. Likewise, I would support if a subsequent motion is made to support the 2020 funding level. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Friesen. I'll go to Councillor Blackburn to close.
Thank you, Mayor Given. I won't say much more about this. I appreciate all of the comments that have been made and certainly agree with some of them. I will point out that despite the fact that we have asked some of our own departments and some groups to accept less money, there are groups on this list who are getting what they asked for. And so it's not an across the board cut. I'll go with the wisdom of council, and I hope that if this is defeated, that we do at least look at retaining the funding at the 2020 level. And so thank you for the chance to comment.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Blackburn. So I'll call for the vote on Councillor Blackburn's motion, which would recognize the Grande Prairie Library Board funding as $1.6995 in 2021. All those in favor? I see 2 in favor and opposed. Sorry, Councillor Thiessen.
Yeah, sorry, I misvoted. I'm opposed.
Yeah, I always start with in favor. So all those in favor of the motion? Okay, I see 1 in favor. Thank you, Councillor Blackburn. All those opposed? Okay, that motion does not carry. Are there any other motions arising? Councillor O'Toole.
Yeah, I'd make the motion to provide funding at the recommendation for 2021 by administration, which is $1,605,500.
Okay,
and to
thanks
speak to that, just to speak to that, there's a lot of people in this community, a lot of people working for the city of Grande Prairie took a hit, and I think, don't get me wrong, this is not an easy decision to do, this budget stuff, but in the end, we are trying to tighten our belts and make sure that, and I've been on the board, I've worked on the library board a number of years, and I understand the costs and the dealings with the wages and all that other stuff, but I think this is a time to make that cut now, and I would hope that we get some support here, so thank you.
Okay, thanks, Councillor O'Toole. I see Councillor Bressie.
Great. Thank you, Mayor Given. I'm really glad that we passed an earlier motion to have a different process for the library funding, because I think it is much needed, because I don't know how any councillor can speak confidently about the library budget and what impact this would have on programs, because I certainly can't, as somebody who's read all the information before me as somebody who's attended board meetings as Councillor Friesen's alternate this year, and some of those were discussing the budgets. I still don't really have an understanding of what this reduction would have, what impact it would have on the library's programming. What I do know, though, is that we're at a time where the library services are more important than ever. We've got a lot of residents who have a lot less disposable income, and they're looking for healthy places for entertainment and to feed their minds and their social lives and their spirits, and the library contributes to that. We've got a lot of residents who are figuring out what's next for work, and maybe they're going back to school, or maybe they're looking for another job, and whether it's having computers to use in the library or books to use or just a quiet place to study, it's really important for them. We've got kids who just lost out on months of school, and their schooling in September is uncertain, and any kind of education programs they can access through the library are more important than ever. I just don't think the library services are more important than ever. I don't know what a reduction of funding would have in terms of the impact on their ability to deliver those services. And for me, I can't support this cut.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Bressie. I'll enter to say that I also won't support the motion. I'll just reflect on it personally. My use of the public library has actually increased over the last while because I've been making more frequent use of their digital resources like audiobooks and digital books. And although those physical items don't come with the same kind of cost as something on the shelf, they absolutely are not free. There's a cost to acquisition and maintaining those. And so in addition to the things that Councillor Bressie highlighted about how the library continues to be important in people's lives and likely will be more important as we come out of COVID, I think that it has continued to provide a very high level of service and likely has seen some of its demand on some of its services increase over the last while. And so those are the reasons why I wouldn't support a reduction and would be, again, happy to maintain at the 2020 funding level. Other discussion? I think I saw Councillor Friesen and then Councillor Clayton. Sorry, Councillor Clayton.
Thanks, Mayor Gibbon. I will support this motion. I think I agree with both the highlights that were brought forward from Councillor Bressie as well as yourself, Mayor Gibbon. I do think that families with younger kids especially utilize the library. I think that, there are some students that utilize it. I think post-secondary students utilize the college library. I do think there are other open spaces that people can use for gathering right within the same facility. I just think that simply this organization has reserves, some of them that aren't, and sure, they may be in buckets of what they're to be used for, but they're not as sort of focused as the three that were left from individuals to support the organizations. Those ones aside, there's still a fair amount of money there that if there had to be a reduction this year so that other organizations that are suffering from COVID more, with more impact could be supported, I think that that would be appropriate. And I think that the running the costs of the library are expensive. However, we are very fortunate to have a significant facility, and I don't know that every demographic within our community really uses it. I think it serves a very niche part of our community. And I love that they do the e-books and the online stuff, but as you mentioned, that doesn't take a lot of space. And so I think that programming wouldn't be that impacted with a reduction, and therefore I will support a reduction. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Clayton. Any other discussion? I see Councillor Bressie, Councillor Thies, and then Councillor Bressie.
Thank you very much, Mayor Gibbon. Just a question for administration. I'm trying to wrap my head around expenses. I couldn't find it on my own. In the lease agreement that we have with the library, leasing them holding space at the Montrose Cultural Center, do they pay their full share of utilities and custodial services?
Ms. Cajolet?
Thank you, Mayor Gibbon. No, currently the city contributes approximately $1.1 million to the library in gift in kind, and that would include security and custodial services, those kind of things.
What about tenant improvements? Is the library responsible for tenant improvements, or if something happens at the library, do they call the city and say, hey, something's wrong with the MCC, you need to fix it in this corner of the building?
Yes, certainly the building would be maintained by our corporate facilities management team.
Okay, so it wouldn't cost the library anything if they needed to fix it, unless they wanted to, let's say, use more of the Jansen Fund and develop more use space?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate those answers. For those reasons, I'm going to support Councillor O'Toole's motion, and largely because I do think that the City of Grande Prairie has shown that the library, to us, at least within our operations, within our organization, and within our agreements, that we're very proud to have the library at the City of Grande Prairie. We're proud to fund them, proud to give them space, we're proud to give them a great deal. And you know, I think what we're talking about here is $45,000. As it's been stated ad nauseum, there's a lot of not-for-profit organizations that are hurting, and we're at the top of our list right now. I know that there's going to be other councillors, myself included, who might be advocating for other increases here. And if we want to control our own spending, and if we want to take a hard look at the library and realize what's fair and what's good, I think we need to give our administration that time. And I think administration has taken the time in evaluating all the agreements and the funding arrangements to bring forward this recommendation, which I'm not opposed to. So for all those reasons, I will support it. And I look forward to hearing more about the library operations and where our funding can go to make the library system even better in the future. Thanks.
Okay. Thanks, Councillor Thiessen. Councillor Bresty, then Councillor Clayton.
Thank you. I won't make more arguments. I've already done that, but just a piece of information I want to share with council. There's been some conversation about digital downloads, and challenge that I've heard expressed to me, not just by our library, but other libraries as well, is actually how expensive digital downloads are. You'd think that they're a lot cheaper for the library to let you use than a physical book. They don't take space. They don't take somebody sorting them, all that. But the publishers charge a ridiculous amount of money every time somebody accesses a digital download. And I know even before COVID, keeping up with the cost of digital downloads was a big concern that many libraries had. So, I just caution council, don't think if people are going digital, that means the library's got less costs. It's actually likely the opposite for them.
Thanks, Councillor Clayton.
Thanks, Mayor Given. On that note, I'm curious, although the subscription maybe costs more with less labor in the facility, how that balances out in the end. So echoing Councillor Thiessen's comments I look forward to see more assessment of the operation over the next little while. I did have another comment and I just think I lost it. Shoot, give me 1 second. No, if I come back before the vote, I'll let you know. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Clayton. And I'm not sure that I had anybody else in the queue, so your time might be running out here before we move on to voting on Councillor O'Toole's motion. If there wasn't anything further, then I will go back to Councillor O'Toole if he wishes to close on the motion.
Yes, thank you very much, Mayor Given. Going back a few years when I was on the board, I attended a number of library board conferences for the entire province. And I can tell you that our library was ranked up there #1. We didn't have, when they come out and talked about new technology, we already implemented it here in Grande Prairie. So we are ahead of the game when it comes to technology. We're not a backwards library that's barely making ends meet and very little people being members. We do have a classy, first-class library here in town. I will put that on the table right now. But I don't think we need to be #1 in everything that we do. And I think that if we have a few programs that have to be taken off this year or downsized and minimized, I think this is the time to do it. And I truly think that we need to look at the big picture. You can do a lot of things in that library once you're in there for free, including playing games, being on the computers, and all that kind of stuff. So leave it at that. There are a lot of free options at that library. You can go in there at 9 or 10 o'clock in the morning and read books till late at night, and there's no cost. If you want to take the book out, there's no cost for the membership either. So if they want to increase, there's a possibility of charging again. Doesn't have to be much, but there's a lot of things that they can do to save money or increase revenue. And at that, I'll leave it alone. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor O'Toole. So we'll call for the vote on Councillor O'Toole's motion, which would reflect the Grande Prairie Public Library Board 2021 funding at the administration recommended amount of $1.605,500. All those in favor of Councillor O'Toole's motion? I see 1, 2, 3, 4, and all those opposed? I see 1, 2, 3, 4. So that motion does not carry. So we are in a position of needing to find an amount that will be able to get a majority of council. I saw a couple of council members there. Councillor Thiessen, I'll give you a try. Yeah. Councillor O'Toole's had a try, and Councillor Blackburn's had a try, so we'll give you a try.
All right. This is me with my arms out, and I feel like Blackburn and O'Toole are pulling on each side. But I'm going to make the motion, and I'm going to support the motion since I'm making the motion, that we fund according the Grande Prairie Public Library according to 2020 grant allocations. So that would be $1,650,000.
Okay. Thanks, Councillor Thiessen. So we had one motion for their requested amount of 1.69 and change. We had one motion for their 2021 recommended amount from administration. And so this one is for the maintaining at the 2020 amount. Okay. Thanks, Councillor Thiessen. Open for discussion debate. Councillor Clayton.
Thanks, Mayor Given. I guess question for Councillor Thiessen. I'm curious on the thought of the amount from 2020. Administration had already told us that 2020 was an increase from 2019. So in turn, by keeping it at 2020, you're in effect giving them the same amount of money for 2 years. However, you did support the discussion in regards to, what the next year looks like in regards to operations and potentially funding less. So I'm just curious why that number.
Well, it seemed like everybody that was voting against the recommended number was voting in that favor. And honestly, Councillor Clayton, I would like to move this along. I think we've got it in the operational arena, and we can look at this. I think dealing with this funding right now, we're going to be at 4-4 votes or 4-5 votes in the future. I don't want to drag this out long again, and I don't want our organizations feeling like we're dragging it out. I'm just taking $50,000 off the top of my community group funding budget line for what I'm comfortable spending, and I can recognize as a member of Peace Library Systems and a former member of the Grande Prairie Public Library the services that libraries do provide to our community. They're holistic. Councillor O'Toole said so in his close. They provide a lot of free stuff. They're there for the community. They even give free memberships to anybody who wants to. If you want to open a book in the morning, you can read it right till the night. Those are just some of the reasons why the library is important. And as far as this discussion, I don't want to belabor it over $45,000. I know that's going to be important somewhere else. But I just feel like we're going to be deadlocked at 4-4 votes. So I'm more than willing to step over to the other side and see how this one works out. So,
if I can, Mayor Given. Wait, sorry. Is that okay? Thanks. Yeah, I can't support the motion. I do believe that for some of the reasons as stated, that they do give a lot away free to the community, and they do have reserves, and they truly haven't seen the impact of what COVID looks like. Their programming may not be reduced. They may see an increase due to people not wanting to do sports programs because they're closer proximity people. They may want to do socially spaced activities that are more regulated. So I think that there's opportunities for the organization to be successful based on administration's recommendations, and therefore I can't support the motion.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Clayton. And anybody else for a discussion debate on the motion? I'll just say I will support the motion. I think I indicated before I would at that dollar amount, but I support the spirit of the motion as an attempt to establish a consensus. This is the job of council, is to find something that is sort of the I can live with it. And we will have a range of different opinions on many of the different items here. And it is likely that none of us will always get our way. And so we have to be willing sometimes to move somewhat off a position so that we can move forward an issue. And I think that's what Councillor Thiessen was referencing. You know, so I'm okay with this one. I may end up on the losing side of others, but I will always be make my best attempt to try to find a consensus. And so I appreciate Councillor Thiessen putting this on the table in that spirit. Any other discussion or debate? Seeing none, then I'll call for the vote on Councillor Thiessen's motion to reflect the 2020 funding to be at the 2021 funding to be at the 2020 amount. All those in favor? Thank you. And all those opposed? I see 3 opposed, so that motion does carry. And I'm going to have to ask on that one if I can have another council member take over as chair for a moment. I'm not sure who's on our schedule of deputy mayor right now. But if I can ask, is that you, Councillor Minhas?
That's me, yeah.
Okay, sure. So Councillor Minhas, if you can take us in, we are looking for motions arising. We've dealt with everything with respect to the Grande Prairie Public Library. And so we can either have a motion to approve the rest of the list, or if anybody has a specific group that they would like to make a motion with respect to, then let's start with that one group. So I'll just leave you there and I have to exit the meeting for a second.
Thank you, well, Mayor Gibbon. So I'll take the chair for a couple of minutes until he comes back. So are we going to go on the agenda A online items, or are we going to go approve all, or B? We can do, maybe we can go with the B first and get that done. Go ahead, Jackie.
Okay, so as the mayor had indicated, there are an opportunity for motions right now going through some of the items in Schedule A. I would like to move that council support the funding of the Grande Prairie Sport Council to the amount of $108,000. That is the amount that was funded in 2020. It is above the current recommendation from administration. I do think that on many levels, this organization will be an organization that will continue to grow. And by reducing it by $50,000 will mean a staff implication. Therefore, their operations, their initiatives, and the overall intent of what the organization plans to do for the region will be diminished. This organization, to me, it needs to be a key factor in economic recovery, sport tourism, and they're truly the hub for what sport is in our region. They continue to work on, during COVID times, they're working on what can we do to strengthen sport coaching. While you're at home, sending out courses that sport parents can take, volunteers can take. Of the organizations that we fund, this organization touches as many, if not more than any other organization that we touch, and that we fund rather. This to defund this organization in half, in my opinion, will be the demise of what we are seeing from this organization. We're seeing huge growth. I think that Councillor Bressie is currently the councillor on that, and he may want to add to this, but I encourage council to support to keep this organization viable and growing. We need to fund it at a minimum of what it was in 2020. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jackie. Is there any question asked on the motion? Go ahead, Dylan.
Great, thank you. Councillor Clayton, I appreciate you making this motion, and I'll be supporting it. And I know we've all been in the awkward situation of we're appointed to a board and we feel that we need to speak on that organization's behalf, whether or not we personally would be doing that on our own. I want to say that the reason I asked Mayor Gibbon to appoint me to the Sport Connector board because I so passionately believe in this one. So this is me not just saying this as a board member. This is me saying this as a community member who's accessed this organization. Please, let's fund this. Something I want to highlight to council is in 2018, we worked with the college to do an inventory of all of our nonprofit organizations in town. And I don't know if you guys can see this bar graph too well, but all the bars on this bar graph represent how many organizations we have in different sectors of our nonprofit world. The huge line, that's how many sports organizations we have. So I think this right here tells you how big a role sport plays in our community. And then looking through that audit again, it identified the top 5 challenges that nonprofits in town have said they're having. And number one challenge that nonprofits were having was funding reliability. The Sport Connector helps that. I can attest for one nonprofit I'm involved in this year, we got $50,000 worth of grants, only because the Sport Connector helped us find those grants and figure out how to fill them out. They also helped nonprofits figure out sponsorship fulfillment in terms of giving sponsors good value for the dollars they put in. Funding reliability helps. Number two challenge our nonprofits identified to our community was volunteer retention. That's why the Sport Connector does a Sports Excellence Awards Night every single year, to give a good gala for organizations to bring their volunteers to get them great recognition. Number three, they don't really help too much with, but the number four thing that our nonprofits said they had issues with was staff training. The Sports Connector provides sometimes free and sometimes very affordable training to coaches and other staff within organizations. And number five big challenge our nonprofits said they had was community awareness. And that's why the Sport Connector does Try It Days 2 times a year to help sports organizations get their names out there and let people try their sports. And also they do lots of social media work and lots of other work to help raise that awareness. So this is an organization that really helps out truly important groups in our town. And I can tell you that if we do reduce their funding as recommended, that will absolutely kill this organization. The organization is already running as lean as possible. I sat on the budget committee and we made the hard decision of letting go a staff resource. We also made the hard decision of giving up office space that we were paying rent for and moving our employees to home, and now they're in some free office space. But it's the changes we made, we were confident weren't going to hurt its mandate in this community. Further cuts, I can tell you, really are going to have huge implications on its ability to support sports organizations. And I know in our presentation, the mention was made that maybe the city can help with gift in kind support. Again, as somebody on their budget committee, I can tell you there aren't significant opportunities for there. The two opportunities that got identified as potentials, one was gift in kind support for Try It Days. We already donate some space for Try It Days, and we're not alone in that. Other municipalities in the region donate space, and a whole bunch of private businesses donate space as well. So that's already gift in kind that the organization is receiving. The other idea was maybe we can give gift in kind of using the bows for the annual gala. Well, that space that's already donated by Terra Energy Services that Terra gets as part of their naming rights out at Evergreen Park. If the Sports Connector moved from doing their event at Clarkson Hall to the Bow Center, it's not like there'd be a $15,000 check materializing. So that makes no financial impact to the organization. So I don't think there is significant room to increase gift in kind support to this organization. This would just be a straight cut to their budget and absolutely would gut its ability to do things. And I think that would be a shame for our sports organizations. I also wonder if it might end up costing the city money in the long run. Actually, I'm very confident it would cost the city money in the long run. The kind of support that this organization gives to putting in bids, to recruiting sponsorship, to helping with volunteer retention, with recruitment, to figuring out different facilities, to coordinating different user groups. That stuff, if they're not doing, then either we've got a lot of money not coming into our community, or else we have to have city staff doing. And I know that we're going to be spending a lot more money having city staff doing that than having this nonprofit that's also supported by other municipalities doing. So I really appreciate Councillor Clayton's motion to keep the Sport Connector funding flat this year, and I hope that the rest of the council will support it. Please don't reduce their funding in half. You'll absolutely gut them if you do.
Thank you, Dylan. I think Mayor Gibbon is back, I think.
Yeah, thanks.
The motion is on the table. The recommending funding, if my understanding is 104,250 as is requested, or Jackie, you want 108? 108? Okay, that's it.
Okay, thanks very much for that, Councillor Minhas, and thanks for taking over in the pinch there. Much appreciated, and thanks for getting me up to date. Councillor Clayton, it was your motion to fund them at the 2020 level of $108,000.
Yep.
Was there any other discussion or debate on that motion before we would go to Councillor Clayton to close? Seeing none, then Councillor Clayton.
Thanks, Mayor Gibbon. Yeah, for all the reasons that Councillor Bressie highlighted, as well as the fact that you don't have to be a sport advocate and you don't have to be a sport person. Maybe, you know, you're a culture person or you're a library person or whatever, but the numbers simply show that our community is a sport community. Not only is it great for health and fitness and mental health and all the reasons that, you know, we are aware of, it's great for our community and economic. Sport tourism is a huge economic driver in our community. By strengthening the volunteers that we work with through these organizations, Sport Connection continues to make themselves extremely important in our community. The coaching, the volunteer strengthening, the helping on the bid packages to bring sporting events to our community, all those pieces are instrumental to economic recovery in our and just general economic development in our community. I think that, as mentioned, and I agree, if we were to cut this in half, it truly is a body, and we won't see the gains and the successes out of the organization that we've seen in the past. Thanks.
Okay, thanks very much, Councillor Clayton. That was the close on Councillor Clayton's motion to fund the Sports Council at their 2020 funding level of $108,000. I'll call for the vote. All those in favor? Thank you. I see the unanimous. That carries. So were there any other motions that anybody wanted to bring to the table? Councillor Blackburn.
Thank you, Mayor Given, and I hope after the hornet's nest I stirred up last time, Council will forgive me for this one. But I do have another motion which I will state and then speak to explain my my stand. Now, what we just did with the Sport Connector will make a slight difference to my argument. However, I would move that the 14 organizations with proposed 2021 funding at amounts less than requested be granted the amounts requested. My thinking on this is, when I looked at, I did a little bit of math. I subtracted out the public library. I subtracted out the contractual obligations that are highlighted in the list with that salmon color highlighting. I subtracted out the organizations that we had already decided or was proposed that be funded at zero. And I took out the ones that are going to be funded through the arts development process rather than through this process. And that leaves a funding ask from those 15 organizations, because I will include the Sport Connector for the sake of my argument. The ask is $134,000 increase over last year. The cuts that are being proposed compared to the ask from those organizations at $206,000. And so the actual saving to us in 2021 over 2020 is $72,000. And now, having already decided to fund the Sport Connector at $50,000 more, we're talking about a savings of $22,000 if we go with the proposed cuts for 2021. And I'm thinking that 14 organizations getting a total of $22,000 worth of cuts is it's simply not necessary. I know if I had $22,000 in my pocket, I'd be beginning from year to year. But $22,000 for the city is a mere drop in the bucket. And so I would suggest that it's not worth putting those 14 organizations through the grief of dealing with cuts from their ask for the sake of that amount of money.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Blackburn. Councillor Blackburn, before we get into discussion, I don't know about other council members, but I may need some assistance on identifying which of the groups you're talking about and which, you know, specific amounts. Yeah, I just need additional clarity because I'm not able to count it out the same way you are.
No, no, I spent some time at the calculator to work this out, but I can, if you wish, I can list the 14 organizations that I'm identifying. You can see the amounts that are on attachment A if I point those out. Center for Creative Arts, the Council for Lifelong Learning, the Prairie Gallery Society, the Archives, St. Lawrence Community Support Association, Technical Search and Rescue, Victim Services, Big Brothers and Big Sisters, Safe Communities, Live Theater, Watershed Alliance, Nighthawk, Spinal Cord Injury Association, and STARS. Does that help?
Yeah, and your motion is to see them all funded at their 2021 request amount, or the
yes.
2020?
No, at the 2021 request amount,
okay.
which is including the Sport Council is $72,000 more than the proposed total for those same organizations.
And yeah, I think your point before was it's actually less than that because the Sport Council has already been dealt with separately.
That's right.
Okay, so is that clear for everybody? It is those groups that Councillor Blackburn listed and funding those groups to their 2021 request amount. So that motion is clear now that we've gone through. I just want to check with administration if they were able to capture the intent and the specifics of Councillor Blackburn's motion.
Thank you, Mayor Given. I will include the specific list that Councillor Blackburn indicated as part of the motion, so it's very clear.
Okay,
thank you, Arlene.
Okay, so open for discussion debate on Councillor Blackburn's motion. Any discussion or debate on his motion? Okay, I see Councillor O'Toole, then Councillor Clayton.
Yeah, I will not be supporting this. There was administration's got about 6 months worth of work into this, and yeah, we could have given direction a long time ago if we wanted to do this, but we told them to come back with some possible cuts. And to be honest with you, I feel that we do need to make some cuts here, and I will not be supporting this. And if you were to go with the recommendations that administration made, I would stay with those recommendations, but I will not be going and leaving it as it was last year. So sorry, but this is a tough job, and we can't make everybody happy, and we're not gonna, there's a lot of compromising here that has to be done, and there's a lot of work that went into this report, and we've met a number of times, and I think that we need to stay and hold the road where we're at, and stay with the recommendations. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Toole. Councillor Clayton.
Thanks, Mayor Given. I'm still sort of going across the list from the names that Councillor Blackburn identified, but I don't see any of them, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Councillor Blackburn, that have an implication that's grand, as you mentioned. So for me, the community sport connection, or the Grande Prairie Sport Connection, was because it truly was an employee, therefore it's significantly impactful to operations. The ones that have been identified here, they are small amounts, you are right. However, I trust administration's recommendations that these small impacts, these small amounts will also have small impacts, and therefore I can't support the motion. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Clayton. Any other discussion or debate on the motion? I'll just say, if there's anybody else that certainly have the opportunity, I'll just say that I will support the motion. And I just would like to say that, you know, council ultimately gets to decide what are priorities and to what extent. Council also gets to decide to what extent we wish to fund our priorities. I think that's fair at any time, and we have the ability to change our mind, to be open to new information. And so, and I think that administration has done a good job of taking what council's previous direction appeared to be. But ultimately, I don't feel a need to cut just because we've been on a bit of a cutting path. If something is a priority, and I believe that just about each and every one of these groups does deliver on a priority that's important to council, I'm willing to fund them as such. So I'm in support of the motion. I might have preferred to deal with it individually. You know, there are some portions of it that I think maybe are not municipal responsibilities that I would be willing to fund to lesser levels. But I think generally this is a way for us to move forward reasonably. So I'll support the motion. Any other discussion or debate? Councillor Bressie.
Yeah, thank you. I think I'm going to be supporting this motion, and if we had been making motions dealing with all these organizations separately, I doubt I would have supported each and every one of those motions. But in terms of an overall approach, I haven't understood the need to cut community group funding. I think that often cutting this funding risks being penny wise, pound foolish. I look at some of these organizations and I look at technical search and rescue and some of the work that they do to help our RCMP members, who are some of the most expensive resources we have, search scenes for evidence. I look at GP safe communities. Boy, if they prevent one car accident a year, they've saved taxpayers far more money than we give to them. I look at the Watershed Alliance, and water is one of the most important and expensive services that get delivered by municipalities. And having a group that's got not just other municipalities but also industry at the table to make sure that we can continue to deliver safe, clean water saves us a lot of money. And I think that it's and as we've come through COVID, I've really been struggling with, well, does that make me more or less inclined to cut community group funding? And I actually think it makes me even less inclined than I was before to cut this funding, because organizations are struggling at the same time that they're becoming more important in our community than ever before. So I didn't support asking administration to do this work in the first place, and I don't think I support just taking huge broad-based cuts. So I appreciate this motion being made, and I will be supporting it. And then if there was an amendment to remove an organization from this motion or something like that, I might support removing some organizations from this. But in general, I don't want to see broad-based cuts.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Bressie. Any other discussion or debate on Councillor Blackburn's motion? Councillor Thiessen.
Thank you very much, Mayor Given. Sorry, colleagues. Councillor Blackburn's motion made me poop myself. I had to change my shorts, so nobody wanted to see that. I was really on the fence. With the motion as it was with the operating requests. But as I got to think about it, when I was blacked out, I guess, my thoughts on it is we are in a really extraordinary time, coronavirus time. Just yesterday, we had the Grande Prairie Live Theatre come in and ask us for emergency funding, for emergency community group funding, because they're not going to be able to hit their targets and they want to maintain their operations. My fear is that if we cut here, we're going to see a lot of these organizations come back and ask us for emergency funding because A, they're not making as much money, and B, we didn't give them as much money as they were hoping for or as we had originally. I like what Councillor Bressie had to say about penny wise, pound foolish. That's been his moniker through this, and I too didn't support looking at cuts to community group funding. I was okay with this because I know that administration took a really long, hard look into everything and tried to find some happy middle ground for community group funding as well as to the desires of council. With all that being said, as the mayor said, council sets the priorities, and I want to ensure that as much as possible, we're spending our money in the best ways possible. And it's not by having community groups come in and ask us for money because we didn't give it to them when we could have, or maybe when we should have. Because that takes up administration time, takes up council time, and a lot of discussion and deliberation. Now, I can do the math. I think we're tied. I'm not sure But I'll be the fourth vote. I will support Councillor Blackburn's motion. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Councillor Thiessen. Councillor Clayton?
Thanks, Mayor Given. I can appreciate that it may seem like a small number, and to Councillor Bressie, it looks like a brush stroke of reductions. The point being is that our residents need us to support them right now too, not just the community groups. And our residents have been asking us to go through the community group funding and find reductions. And so at a higher level picture, we need to consider the overall impact. These community groups need our support, but so do our residents. And if administration has sat down and gone through the processes with these community groups and made recommendations that they think that these community groups can still operate and still be effective and efficient based on the funding, I trust the recommendations from administration. We need to look at the overall. Sure, it's 50 grand here and it's 50 grand here and it's 50 grand here, but we are going to need some extra money because Councillor Thiessen is right. There are going to be other groups that come to us for funding. This recommendations as set out, in my opinion, are what administration believes can happen, and we need to trust them. They work more on a day-to-day basis with these groups than we do, and some of these impacts are very small. And I think that the impact be small, they will be sufferable. Don't get me wrong; these organizations will suffer, but everybody's going to suffer right now, and we need to worry about our residents as well. And our residents are asking us to review community group funding. Therefore, I won't support the motion to reduce, to maintain the levels as noted. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Friesen?
Thank you, Mayor Given. Boy, this is a tough one. You know, I appreciate the motion in that in the overall budget, it's not a lot of money, and to proceed in this way, rather than going through and picking apart each and every ask, there's merit to that. However, there are organizations here, yes, that may come back to us for emergency funding, but there are also organizations here that essentially this year have all but shut down or even shut down. And with their, you know, having had their grants and their funding already for 2020, and they've not been using it because they've laid off staff, they've closed their doors. And I'm thinking of, for example, the Safe Communities, that the building's been shuttered and the programming's been closed down. And not that it's not, you know, not that I'm saying that, you know, we're just as well without them. What I am saying is that there are also organizations on this list that may need less funding next year because of how they've had to shift and will have to continue to shift potentially for the next year or more because of the crisis that we've all been facing in these last few months. And Councillor Clayton is exactly right. You know, our residents who ultimately are footing the bill for this are really in no better shape than the organizations that we're supporting here. And we need to be mindful of both sides of that equation. You know, it's tough to say while we do need these organizations in some ways more than ever because of this pandemic that we find ourselves in. At the same time, I can't I can't say yes to a wholesale approach like this right now. So I won't be supporting the motion. Tough decision, but that's where I've landed. Thanks.
Okay. Thanks. My apologies, everybody. I have a sense that I'm freezing up a little bit because all of you have been the last minute or so. So if I do go frozen for an extended amount of time, I'd ask Councillor Minhas to take over, and that's just sort of the way it goes with technology. Any other discussion or debate on Councillor Blackburn's motion before I would go to him to close? You know, I do have to address two things. It's important, for me to be able to have a say as well. I think one, there was a point made that our residents are asking us to examine community group funding and reduce it. I haven't been approached by anybody in the public that has asked me to reduce community group funding. I appreciate that council members have heard residents say that they want to see property taxes kept in line and the city to be responsible in the way that it expends funds. I would agree with that. But I, and again, as one member of council, I haven't had anybody come forward and say, please reduce the amount of money that you put into community groups. I haven't had anybody say that. So I can't say that that comment resonates with me. And then also, the point that we should trust administration's recommendations about what is reasonable for these community groups. I think if we just flat out should trust administration's recommendations, then we should trust them all. As we just evidenced with the sport connector, administration's recommendation was substantially different than what council ultimately approved. And that's because council chose that it was a priority. That's what our job is. Administration's job is to try to make some recommendation that fits within a defined funding envelope that they think council is asking for. That's what they've done here. And if we choose to place a greater priority and allocate additional funding than what administration was working with, that's our ability. That's what we are able to do as council. So if we should trust administration's recommendations, then we should have just trusted administration's recommendation with sport council as well. So I'm not sure that we can have it both ways. We have to be clear that what we're doing when we vote for any of these or against any of these is we are setting our own priorities. It's not, we don't get to put this off on administration. Councillor Blackburn, I guess, to close.
Thank you, Mayor Given. Thank you for those comments. And the first thing that I will acknowledge is that the administration did go to a great deal of work at our request to look at the funding that these organizations would get and what they could manage to do. But I also agree with Mayor Given that sometimes our priorities change. And when we first started talking about community group funding and what we should do with it, it was meant. I see I see that I've frozen again. We'll see if this comes back. Hang on a second. I think I'm back. So I was saying that it's been many months since we first started talking about this, and there's been opportunity for a variety of reasons for us to change our minds or to have a different perspective on it. And so I just despite the work that administration has done, I don't think it's out of the way for us to change our mind in this regard. And again, I'll just talk to the idea that we're talking about a relatively small amount of money, but that it would affect a great number of people in those 14 organizations that would be affected. And so I would urge you to support the motion. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that close, Councillor Blackburn. So we'll call for the vote on Councillor Blackburn's motion. Do we need it read back to identify which community groups it impacted? There was a list of 14, and so maybe we just need to go through. Is there somebody with administration that can remind us of that?
Thank you, Mayor Given. I can read the motion back for you. Councillor Blackburn's motion is committee recommend council approve funding to be granted at the 2021 amounts as requested for the following community groups: Center for Creative Arts, Council for Lifelong Learning, Prairie Gallery Society, South Peace Regional Archives, St. Lawrence Community Support Association, Technical Search and Rescue, Grande Prairie and District Victim Services Association, Big Brothers, Big Sisters of Grande Prairie and Area, Grande Prairie and Area Safe Communities Committee, Grande Prairie Live Theater, Mighty Peace Watershed Alliance, Nighthawk, Spinal Cord Injury Association of Alberta, Stars, and the Grande Prairie Sport Council.
The only thing there, I think, would be that the Grande Prairie Sport Council is removed from that list because we dealt with that separately.
Okay.
Correct? Everybody, does that sound, just in terms of getting the motion correct, that sounds like what we actually did? Yes? Okay, so if we're all clear on that motion, then we'll call for the vote. All those in favor? 1, 2, 3. And it looks like Councillor Blackburn is frozen. So this is a difficulty. Councillor Blackburn, how do you vote on that motion?
In favor.
Thank you. Okay, so that's 4 votes in favor. All those opposed? Thank you. I see 4 opposed. That motion does not carry. Other motions arising. Councillor Clayton.
Thank you, Mayor Goodwin. I would move that council support the community group funding grant allocations as presented in attachment A minus Sport Connection and with the library removed.
Okay, thank you. So another motion that's all-inclusive of the administration recommendation this time, but with those 2 exclusions that we dealt with separately, the library board and Sport Connection. So open discussion on that motion. I'm sorry, I do see 2 council members. It looks like somebody's got their microphone open. Maybe we did hear some shuffling around. I'll go to Councillor Friesen, then Councillor Blackburn.
Thank you, Mayor Given. There's actually one more organization I'd like to separate out and talk about, and that is the Grande Prairie Volunteer Services Bureau. So I don't know if we want to make an amendment to this motion or I'll leave that to you, but I would like to talk separately about the Volunteer Services Bureau, please.
Yeah, so Councillor Clayton's motion is specific to all the ones where there is an administration recommendation. I think if there were any other motions following, then we could do that additionally.
To mention that there are some organizations where administration has recommended no funding despite the request from the organization, and I'm glad to hear that the suggestion is that those ones with no funding may be able to be dealt with without, even if this one passes. So I'm happy with that. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Blackburn. Yeah, and just to speak to that in terms of process, I see Councillor Clayton wanting to deal with a whole bunch at once. Somebody might want to try with those other ones separately, but in terms of moving us through this process rather than dealing with each one line by line by line, I'm happy to try motions that have a bunch at once. And then if there are some things that were left out, then we can deal with those separately. Okay. Any other discussion or debate on the motion? Seeing none, then I'll call for the vote. All those in favor? Thank you. That motion carries unanimously. Any other motions arising? Councillor Friesen, it sounded like you had one.
I did. Thank you, Mayor Given. I would actually like to, I'll put the motion on the floor. I would like to move that we fund the Grande Prairie Volunteer Services Bureau for $25,000 for 2021. Okay,
thank you. That motion is clear. Open for discussion or debate, or if you'd like to speak to it.
I will speak to it. So this is an organization that we've seen a great deal of growth and shift in over the last handful of years, and they, in some ways, have the some of the arguments that were made for Sport Connector exist also for Grande Prairie Volunteer Services Bureau. So the VSB really is a resource for the entire nonprofit sector. We heard the executive director a couple of weeks ago speak to us about some of the things that they are doing to assist the nonprofit sector, and that they've even expanded their efforts during COVID, and why I think that it would be important for the city to give some funding to the VSB is because even we are recognizing the importance of the VSB and we're sending organizations to them. What the VSB can do for $25,000 for our nonprofit sector is way more than what the city is able to do for $25,000 for the nonprofit sector. And once we start really recognizing and using the VSB for what they have become, I think we'll see a great deal of benefit in the community. And to speak to the amount, I landed on $25,000. They did ask for $116,500. But when we heard Ms. Simcoe talking, she mentioned that they had lost some grants related to their employment programs. And I'm not particularly interested in the city supporting those programs to be reinstated. But $25,000 is a part-time position in that organization. And again, what a part-time position in an organization like that has a great reach in the nonprofit sector can do, I think would be whatever the opposite of penny wise, pound foolish is. The other way around of that. So that's why I've made this motion. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Friesen. I think, Councillor Clayton, were you in the queue to speak to this? Councillor Clayton?
Mayor Given, no, I had a question of why the amount, so thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. Any other discussion or debate on Councillor Friesen's motion? I don't see any. And Councillor Blackburn, if you're there, we're going to move to the vote on this item. If you wish to vote on it, we'll have to be able to see you. And if you're not able to, that's okay. We do have to excuse ourselves from the meeting from time to time, as I did, and even sometimes as technology sort of sets up for us. There we go. Councillor Blackburn's back. So we will then, if there's nothing else arising on Councillor Friesen's motion to fund the Grande Prairie Volunteer Services Bureau for $25,000 in 2021. Councillor Friesen?
I just wanted to add one important point here. The fact is I mentioned that the city has been recommending that some organizations go to the VSB, and I just wanted to remind everyone that most recently we did that with the neighborhood associations. We suggested that they go for assistance to the VSB. So this is an organization that we need. Please support them to this level. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Friesen. Councillor Thiessen?
Thank you very much, Mayor Given. I would actually like to propose an amendment. I was debating on whether or not I would. The amendment to Councillor Friesen's motion that I'm going to propose is not that we fund them $25,000, is that we double that and we fund them to $50,000. I had it in my notes from last week and I was just going over them. They lost their Alberta contract for employment. That was the equivalent of $200,000 to their overall operations. That's a pretty significant hit. And one of the reasons why, at the urging of myself and other council members, that Carol Ann came in and made this pitch, I guess, for funding to at least recoup some of that. Is my understanding from her presentation that $50,000 was kind of like the hopeful bare minimum in order to continue operations. And just to add to Councillor Friesen's comments about the Grande Prairie Volunteer Services Bureau and the role that they play in our community, they're helping other not-for-profits build bylaws, policies, write their governance ship. In fact, they're helping our not-for-profit community stay alive, and they're doing that on the sides as a almost completely free service to our community. This is something that I've been pushing the VSB to come forward with for a long time, and I know for a fact that they wouldn't have come forward if the need wasn't there. So for all those reasons, and the reasons that Councillor Friesen stated about the importance of the Grande Prairie Volunteer Services Bureau in our community and where they're at, I would like to propose this amendment to increase our funding amounts to $50,000. Thank you.
Okay, so that's an amendment to Councillor Friesen's motion. So discussion and debate on Councillor Thiessen's amendment. The amendment being to change the amount in Councillor Friesen's motion from $25,000 to $50,000. Is there any discussion or debate on Councillor Thiessen's amendment? I don't see any. Then I will call for the vote on Councillor Thiessen's amendment. All those in favor? See 1, 2, 3, 4. And all those opposed? see 1, 2, 3, 4. So that motion does not carry. We're back to the main motion as originally proposed. Is there any discussion or debate on Councillor Friesen's motion as originally proposed to reflect $25,000 of funding for the Volunteer Services Bureau in 2021? Seeing none, then I will call for the vote on Councillor Friesen's motion. All those in favor? Thank you. I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And all those opposed? I see 2 opposed. That motion does carry. Were there any other motions arising with respect to community group funding? Councillor Bressie.
Thank you, Mayor Given. I don't have a motion at this point, but I'd like to ask a question for a minute if I could. And that was just, I noticed that we didn't have any organizations that made new requests be recommended for funding unless I'm missing something on this list. I'm just wondering if administration could speak to, was that a general approach of saying we're not going to recommend any funding to new organizations, or was it just so happened that based on admin's professional advice, these organizations didn't fit into the priorities we had?
Ms. Casuala?
Thank you, Mayor Given. A little bit of both to answer that question. So for the request, as an example, from the Parts Association at Community Services Committee, we did support that group with a gift in kind donation in a way that is thought to be quite beneficial to that group. And we were just trying to match the requests that were received in the funding envelope, for lack of a better term, that we provided, and trying to match those with what we believe to be council priorities.
Great, thank you. Just a comment I'll make where I think it's going to come up when we talk about policy 315. So I don't have a motion to talk about these, but I am concerned about our process, that we might be making it both too difficult for organizations we already fund to kind of get out of our process, and but also new organizations to come into our process and get funding. And I hope that when we do talk about policy 315 at the right committee, that we're having a sweet conversation about how are we creating room for organizations that don't currently get funding to get funding. And the hard conversation there is, I don't think that just means we expand our community group envelope for them. That probably means we need to stop funding some. But it's concerning to me that we're not giving any new funding to any new organizations, but it's hard to know if that's our process or if that's just the asks we got. But I hope that gets council attention as we talk about our policy.
Well, I guess I just, knowing that there's no motion, I would just make the observation I did earlier in one of the debates that this is all about council setting priorities. And if council saw one of these community groups as a priority, we have full ability here to make a motion to fund them. Administration has thankfully and helpfully categorized them sort of in accordance with the policy that is being proposed. And it's up to council to decide whether they see different priorities than what administration's recommendation was. And that's okay. Like that's sort of the, and that likely will be the process going forward, but a future council or this council may change it down the road. If there weren't any other motions on the specifics of funding these community groups in terms of operations, then we could move on to the item around capital funding, which has not yet been dealt with. Councillor Minhas.
I'll move the capital attachment B as is recommended by the administration to move all together.
Okay, thank you. So a motion to recommend council approve capital funding as recommended by administration in attachment B. Discussion and debate on that motion. Mr. Bressie.
Great, thank you. Just a question about the Royal Canadian Legion. I'm just curious if you could give, I think I've got an understanding of what the other organizations, what their asks consisted of. The Legion, I don't know what specifically they were asking in terms of capital funding. So can you just give me an overview of what the request was?
Ms. Casuala?
I certainly can, if you can just give me one moment to look up the details.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Given. The capital request from the Legion was renovations primarily to improve wheelchair accessibility, add in a lift for that building and bring it up to code in some respects.
And would this contribution, if we had made the contribution they asked for, be the price of the full lift or a portion of that lift? Do you have those details?
Not off the top of my head, but absolutely.
Okay, Councillor Bressie, was there anything else further on Councillor Minhas's motion?
I think there's some others in the queue, so I'm hesitant to make a...
I actually don't remember anybody else. Okay, Councillor Thiessen?
Yeah. Thanks, Mayor Given. Thanks, Councillor Bressie. I just had a question in regards to the Grande Prairie Live Theater's capital ask. I'm pretty sure Wayne mentioned it yesterday, but a little foggy on the details. Could you explain what that ask for almost 46,000 was that we're granting 20,000 for? Ms. Casually?
Certainly, we're looking that up as well. So thank you, Mayor Given. I don't know the details related to the Legion request. I don't know if that would fund the full cost of the required renovations. I suspect not, but I don't know that for sure.
Okay, thank you. And looks like you're still searching for the details on the live theater request. So appreciate administration is looking at that. Could we, well, no, I was just going to say, could we deal with the list of items there? But I guess this impacts council decision-making on those items. So, yeah, Ms. Casually?
So the description for the request related to the Grande Prairie Live Theater is for some safety concerns, also some aesthetic improvements to the building and modernization.
Okay, thanks, Ms. Casually. Councillor Thiessen?
Oh, I was just giving thumbs up. Thanks for that info, Stephanie. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Councillor Thiessen. So is there any other discussion or debate on Councillor Minhas's motion? Seeing none, then I'll just, okay, there you are, Councillor Clayton, thank you. There you were. There you are. Then I will call for the vote on Councillor Minhas's motion. All those in favor? Thank you. That looks unanimous. So I think that deals with all of our business with respect to the community group funding for 2021. I'll just, the quick review, I guess. The two items that were related to the Arctic Winter Games, we referred to the appropriate standing committee in August. And then the other two items in the center, the 2021 operational funding and 2021 capital funding, have both been dealt with. So I think I would just look to administration to make sure that there wasn't anything else that you needed council to deal with. And I don't believe there is. Then thank you. Thanks, Ms. Casually. Then if that's the case, was there anything else for this council committee of the whole meeting? Seeing none, then we are meeting adjourned. Thank you very much, everybody.
Goodbye.
Thank you.